The radar signature appeared at 3:47 hours, threading through restricted airspace like a ghost with engines. Control Tower Bravo 7 watched the blip dance across their screens, defying every protocol in the book. No flight plan, no transponder code, no radio contact, just a single aircraft moving with surgical precision through corridors that should have been empty. Ghost Rider, this is Tower Control. You are in violation of restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately. The radio crackled with static, then silence. The controller's coffee grew cold as he repeated the call, his voice growing sharper with each attempt. Outside, the pre-dawn darkness stretched endlessly, broken only by the rhythmic sweep of runway lights cutting through morning fog. Major Catherine Reaper Voss heard every word through her headset, but her hands remained steady on the controls of her modified A-10C Thunderbolt II. The twin engines hummed with quiet authority behind her, their familiar vibration a comfort she'd known for 12 years of service. Her aircraft wasn't supposed to exist in any official capacity. A ghost bird painted in non-reflective gray, stripped of identifying markers, equipped with experimental avionics that turned her into a shadow among clouds. The F-22 Raptors launched 6 minutes later, their afterburners painting orange streaks across the horizon. Two sleek Predators ascending to intercept what their pilots assumed was another territorial violation, another routine escort mission. They had no idea they were chasing someone who had already mapped every inch of their flight patterns, someone who understood their capabilities better than they understood their own. Viper 1-1, contact established. Target bearing 270, altitude Angels 15, speed 400 knots. The lead Raptor pilot's voice carried the casual confidence of someone who had never met an aircraft he couldn't outmaneuver. His wingman acknowledged with crisp professionalism, both jets adjusting course to execute a standard intercept pattern. Reaper smiled grimly, her weathered hands adjusting trim tabs with the muscle memory of countless combat missions. Her dark eyes, framed by premature lines earned in the skis over 3 different theaters, tracked the approaching fighters through her heads-up display. They would expect her to run, to panic, to make the amateur mistakes that turned intercepts into quick victories. Instead, she maintained course and speed, becoming a puzzle they couldn't immediately solve. The morning sun crept over distant mountains, casting long shadows across the landscape below. Somewhere in those shadows, Rescue Team 9 was counting down to an extraction that couldn't wait for bureaucratic clearance. Lives hung in the balance, ticking away with each passing second, while protocol demanded she identify herself to pilots who wouldn't understand the mission even if she could tell them. Her radio remained silent. The hunt had begun. The F-22s closed distance with predatory patience, their pilots running through standard intercept procedures with mechanical precision. Lead pilot Captain Marcus Falcon Rodriguez had executed this dance dozens of times. Unknown aircraft, territorial violation, escort to designated landing strip. Simple mathematics of superior technology and overwhelming tactical advantage. Viper 1-2, establish visual contact, Rodriguez commanded, his Raptor slicing through morning air with barely a whisper. The stealth fighter responded to his inputs like an extension of his own nervous system, sensors painting a detailed picture of the airspace ahead. His wingman, Lieutenant Cole Torch Patterson, maintained perfect formation spacing, their two-ship element representing the apex of American air superiority. Reaper watched their approach through her rearview mirrors, noting the textbook precision of their positioning. These weren't weekend warriors or fresh academy graduates. Their formation discipline spoke of extensive training and combat experience. But they were hunting according to rules that no longer applied to her situation, constrained by protocols that would cost precious minutes she couldn't afford to lose. Her modified A-10 carried none of the elegant stealth characteristics of the pursuing Raptors. Instead, she flew a machine built for punishment, its titanium bathtub cockpit designed to absorb punishment that would vaporize lesser aircraft. The twin turbofan engines mounted high on her fuselage could run on anything from jet fuel to diesel, a reliability that had saved her life on 3 separate occasions when supply lines failed in hostile territory. Unknown aircraft. You are ordered to descend to Angels 5 and proceed to bearing 090 for mandatory landing and inspection. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of authority backed by 2 AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles and a 20 cannon that could reduce her aircraft to debris in seconds. The tactical display in Reaper's cockpit showed what the F-22 pilots couldn't see: the precise location of Rescue Team 9, pinned down in a valley 40 miles southeast, their extraction window closing rapidly. Combat search and rescue operations ran on split-second timing, coordinated between ground teams, helicopters, and covering aircraft in a ballet that collapsed completely when any element failed to perform. Her hands moved across control surfaces with practiced efficiency, adjusting power settings to maintain optimal fuel consumption, while her mind calculated distances, fuel loads, and time remaining. The modified navigation system displayed multiple waypoints, each one critical to the success of a mission that officially didn't exist. Black operations required ghost pilots flying ghost aircraft, invisible to oversight committees and congressional hearings. Viper 1-1, target is maintaining course and altitude. No compliance with instructions. Patterson's voice carried a note of confusion. Most aircraft intercepted by F-22s developed sudden enthusiasm for following directions. Rodriguez frowned behind his oxygen mask, studying the thermal signature of the aircraft ahead. The A-10's twin engines glowed like small suns on his infrared display, but something about the heat distribution pattern seemed wrong. Modified exhaust systems, enhanced cooling, non-standard engine configurations. This wasn't a typical Warthog configuration. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of ground fog and revealing the harsh beauty of the landscape below. Somewhere in those mountains, American servicemen were counting down to a rendezvous that couldn't be delayed, couldn't be rescheduled, couldn't be explained to pilots bound by classification levels they didn't possess. Reaper's decision crystallized with absolute clarity. She would complete her mission. The engagement envelope tightened like a noose around Reaper's aircraft as the F-22s maneuvered into optimal intercept positions. Rodriguez and Patterson executed a classic pincer movement, one high and left, one low and right, creating overlapping fields of fire that would make escape impossible for any conventional aircraft. Their radar-locked tones echoed through their cockpits with mechanical insistence, computers calculating firing solutions with millisecond precision. Unknown aircraft, final warning. Descend immediately or face defensive action. Rodriguez's voice had lost its earlier professional courtesy, replaced by the cold authority of a man prepared to follow rules of engagement to their logical conclusion. His thumb hovered over the weapon select switch, muscle memory, ready to transition from intercept to engagement in a heartbeat. Reaper's response came not through radio communication, but through a maneuver that defied every assumption about A-10 performance characteristics. Her aircraft suddenly dove toward the deck, pulling negative G-forces that would have incapacitated most pilots. The modified flight controls responded to inputs that pushed the airframe beyond its published limitations, diving toward terrain at angles that shouldn't have been survivable. Jesus Christ, did you see that? Patterson's voice cracked with surprise as he watched the Warthog disappear into a canyon system that appeared on no standard navigation chart. His F-22 banked hard to follow, afterburners painting twin streaks of fire across the morning sky. The canyon walls rose around Reaper's aircraft like stone cathedral spires, their surfaces worn smooth by millennia of wind and weather. She flew her machine between rock formations with margins measured in feet rather than yards, her aircraft's bulk threading through spaces that seemed impossible for anything larger than a fighter jet. The terrain following radar painted detailed pictures of obstacles ahead, but her eyes remained focused on the horizon line visible through breaks in the canyon walls. Viper Flight, be advised, target has entered the Badlands sector. Navigation hazard, extreme terrain. The voice from ground control carried notes of concern that penetrated even the professional detachment of military communications. The Badlands earned their designation through a combination of unpredictable wind patterns, radar shadows, and rock formations that had claimed aircraft from every service branch. Rodriguez pulled his Raptor into a high orbit above the canyon entrance, his advanced sensors struggling to maintain contact through the electromagnetic interference generated by iron-rich rock formations. The stealth fighter's sophisticated avionics, designed to dominate open airspace, found themselves confused by an environment that predated radar by geological epochs. Target lost in ground clutter, he reported, frustration evident despite his professional training. Switching to wide area search pattern. 8 miles deeper in the canyon system, Reaper's aircraft emerged from radio shadow like a bat from a cave. Her modified navigation system had guided her through passages that existed only in classified databases, routes mapped by reconnaissance flights that officially never happened. The canyon walls fell away to reveal a high desert plateau where rescue helicopters waited with rotors turning, their crews counting down to an extraction that couldn't wait for proper authorization. Her radio crackled to life on an encrypted frequency that bypassed normal communication channels. Ghost Rider, this is Rescue Actual. Team 9 is secure and ready for immediate exfil. Say your status. Rescue Actual, Ghost Rider. Inbound your position, ETA 4 minutes. Be advised, we have company upstairs. Reaper's voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had navigated similar situations dozens of times, her words clipped and efficient despite the complexity of their tactical situation. The rescue operation proceeded with clockwork precision, but overhead, 2 F-22 pilots continued their search with growing determination. The helicopter extraction proceeded with the mechanical efficiency of a well-rehearsed ballet. Team 9, 6 special operations personnel who officially didn't exist in any deployment roster, moved from concealment to aircraft in under 90 seconds. Their faces bore the hollow-eyed exhaustion of men who had spent 72 hours behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence that would never appear in any congressional briefing. Reaper maintained high cover, her A-10 orbiting the extraction site in wide, lazy circles that concealed the intensity of her surveillance. Every sensor aboard her aircraft remained focused on the surrounding airspace, searching for the inevitable return of the F-22s that had lost her in the canyon system. The rescue helicopters, 2 MH-60M Black Hawks flying in formation, represented the culmination of a mission planned 6 months earlier in a Pentagon basement that appeared on no building directory. Ghost Rider, package secure, rescue elements departing your position. The lead helicopter pilot's voice carried professional satisfaction mixed with relief. Successful extractions never felt routine, regardless of how many times you executed them. Copy, Rescue Actual. Safe travels. Reaper banked her aircraft toward the south, following a route that would take her away from the extraction site and toward airspace that wouldn't compromise the helicopter flight. Her mission parameters required her to draw any pursuit away from the departing aircraft, a role that suited both her temperament and her aircraft's capabilities. The F-22s found her 12 minutes later, emerging from their search pattern like hunting wolves that had finally caught a scent. Rodriguez's Raptor descended from high altitude with the patience of a predator that understood its prey had nowhere left to run. The open desert offered no canyon walls for concealment, no terrain features that could mask heat signatures from infrared sensors. Target reacquired, bearing 185, Angels 12, speed 380 knots. His voice carried grim satisfaction as tactical displays painted firing solutions across his heads-up display. Viper 1-2, establish blocking position to the east. Patterson acknowledged with crisp professionalism, his aircraft sliding into position with the fluid grace of a machine designed for exactly this type of engagement. The two F-22s created an envelope of overlapping sensor coverage that would make escape impossible for any conventional aircraft. Their pilots settled into the familiar rhythm of intercept procedures, confident in their technological superiority. But Reaper wasn't flying a conventional aircraft, and she wasn't bound by conventional rules of engagement. Her modified A-10 carried electronic warfare systems that existed in no official inventory, countermeasures developed in black budget programs that pushed the boundaries of physics and international law. The aircraft that appeared on the F-22 sensors bore only superficial resemblance to the machine she actually flew. Unknown aircraft, you will comply with instructions or face immediate defensive action. Rodriguez's ultimatum echoed across all emergency frequencies, officially recorded for the inevitable after-action review that would attempt to make sense of the morning's events. Reaper's response came through actions rather than words. Her aircraft suddenly accelerated beyond the published performance parameters of any A-10 variant, modified engines producing thrust levels that shouldn't have been possible. The gap between hunter and hunted began to close, but not in the direction the F-22 pilots expected. Behind them, the rescue helicopters disappeared into radio shadow, carrying their precious cargo toward safety. The physics of the situation defied every assumption Rodriguez and Patterson had made about their quarry. The A-10 ahead of them was pulling away with acceleration curves that belonged to fighter aircraft, not ground attack platforms built for low-speed survivability. Their F-22s possessed overwhelming advantages in speed, altitude, and maneuverability, yet somehow found themselves struggling to close distance with an aircraft that should have been easy prey. Viper 1-1, I'm showing impossible performance parameters on this contact. Patterson's voice carried confusion that penetrated his professional demeanor. His heads-up display painted thrust-to-weight ratios that violated basic aerodynamic principles, acceleration profiles that suggested engine modifications far beyond anything in official databases. Rodriguez studied his own sensor readings with growing unease. The heat signature from the target aircraft showed power plant configurations that didn't match any known A-10 variant. Modified exhaust systems, enhanced cooling, additional turbofan installations. This wasn't a standard Warthog. It was something else entirely wearing familiar clothing. Control, Viper 1-1. Request immediate tactical assessment on target aircraft. Performance characteristics are not matching known profiles. His radio call connected him to intelligence analysts sitting in climate-controlled bunkers 3 states away, personnel with security clearances that exceeded his own. The response came back encrypted, scrambled through communication systems that added seconds of delay to every exchange. Viper 1-1, target aircraft is not in our database. Maintain intercept but do not repeat. Do not engage without direct authorization from theater command. The qualification in those orders carried implications that both F-22 pilots understood immediately. Someone with stars on their collar had just taken personal interest in their morning intercept mission. The unknown aircraft ahead of them had transitioned from routine violation to matter of national security in the span of a single radio transmission. Reaper monitored their communications through electronic surveillance systems that technically didn't exist, digital ears that listened to every frequency used by military aircraft. She heard the confusion in their voices, the growing uncertainty that replaced their earlier confidence. These were good pilots flying exceptional aircraft, but they were operating within constraints she had abandoned years earlier. Her own radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from sources that appeared on no organizational chart. Ghost Rider, you are cleared to demonstrate capabilities as necessary for mission completion. Acknowledge. Copy Control. Ghost Rider understands. Her response carried implications that would have terrified the F-22 pilots if they had possessed the security clearances to understand them. The aircraft they were chasing represented technology that existed in the gray areas between experimental programs and operational deployment, capabilities that blurred the line between possible and impossible. The morning sun reached its zenith as the three aircraft continued their deadly dance across empty desert. Below them, the landscape stretched in endless variations of brown and tan, broken only by the occasional road or abandoned structure. It was terrain that had witnessed military exercises for generations, a testing ground where new technologies proved themselves before entering official service. Rodriguez made his decision with the calculated precision of a professional warrior. Viper 1-2, establish weapons lock. We're going to convince our friend to land. The threat receivers in Reaper's cockpit immediately lit up with warning tones, electronic alerts that announced her aircraft was being painted by fire control radar. The sound should have triggered immediate evasive action, the beginning of a defensive sequence that would prioritize survival over mission completion. Instead, she smiled with the cold satisfaction of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. The weapons lock changed everything. What had been a cat-and-mouse game of intercept and evasion suddenly escalated to the knife edge of lethal engagement. Rodriguez's F-22 painted Reaper's aircraft with fire control radar that turned warning receivers into shrieking banshees, electronic voices demanding immediate defensive action. Target is locked, switching to tactical frequency. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of a man who had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. His thumb moved to weapon select, cycling through available options with practiced efficiency. AIM-120C AMRAAM missiles sat in their internal bays like sleeping predators, each one capable of reducing the A-10 ahead to scattered debris across 20 square miles of desert. Patterson maintained position in the classic two-ship attack formation, his own weapon systems armed and ready. The tactical display in his cockpit showed firing solutions updated in real time, computers calculating intercept angles and probability of kill with mechanical precision. Both pilots had trained for this moment thousands of times in simulators, but the weight of actual engagement felt completely different. Unknown aircraft, you are being illuminated by fire control radar. Comply with instructions immediately or face defensive engagement. The radio call echoed across emergency frequencies, officially recorded for the after-action reports that would attempt to justify whatever happened next. Reaper's response demonstrated why she had earned her call sign through 12 years of combat operations. Instead of defensive maneuvering, her aircraft suddenly pulled into a vertical climb that defied every assumption about A-10 performance limitations. The modified engines roared with power that shouldn't have existed, pulling her aircraft toward the sun in a maneuver that would have torn apart any standard Warthog. Jesus, look at that climb rate! Patterson's exclamation carried shock that penetrated professional composure. His sensors showed vertical acceleration that belonged to rocket-powered interceptors, not twin-engine ground attack aircraft. The A-10 ahead of them was climbing like it intended to reach orbit. Rodriguez followed the vertical maneuver with his F-22, Afterburners painting orange streaks across morning sky as he tried to match the impossible performance of his quarry. The Raptor's superior thrust-to-weight ratio should have given him every advantage in vertical flight, yet somehow the modified A-10 continued to pull away. At 18,000 feet, Reaper rolled inverted and pulled through to a dive that transformed her aircraft into a gray thunderbolt aimed at the desert floor. The maneuver put her directly between the two F-22s, splitting their formation and forcing them into reactive positioning rather than tactical control. Her aircraft dove past them with closure rates that triggered every collision avoidance system in their cockpits. Viper 1-2, brake left. Brake left. Rodriguez's voice cracked with the intensity of a near miss that put enemy aircraft within visual range of his canopy. The A-10 flashed past his position with relative velocity that made accurate tracking impossible, a gray blur that existed in his peripheral vision for less than 2 seconds. The electronic warfare suite aboard Reaper's aircraft chose that moment to demonstrate capabilities that existed nowhere in official inventories. Jamming signals flooded the F-22s, sensors with white noise that turned sophisticated displays into meaningless static. Radar locks dissolved into electronic snow, communication systems filled with interference that made coordination impossible. "I've lost target lock. All sensors are down." Patterson's voice carried panic that professional training couldn't completely suppress. His F-22 had been reduced to flying on basic instruments, its sophisticated avionics rendered useless by jamming techniques that belonged in science fiction rather than military reality. In the sudden electronic silence that followed, Reaper's voice came through clear and calm on an encrypted frequency that bypassed all jamming. "Falcon and Torch, this is Reaper. Stand down and return to base. You're out of your league." She knew their call signs. She knew their names. The implications hit both F-22 pilots with the force of revelation. The electronic warfare demonstration lasted exactly 30 seconds, long enough to prove a point, short enough to avoid permanent damage to the F-22's sensitive avionics. When the jamming ceased, Rodriguez and Patterson found themselves flying aircraft that felt suddenly primitive compared to whatever technology had just schooled them in the realities of modern air combat. "How did she know our call signs?" Patterson's voice carried the hollow tone of someone whose fundamental assumptions about security had just been shattered. Their mission briefing had contained no mention of electronic warfare threats, no warning about capabilities that could penetrate their communication systems with surgical precision. Rodriguez stared at his tactical display as it slowly rebuilt the picture of surrounding airspace. The unknown A-10 had resumed normal flight parameters, maintaining course and altitude, as if the previous engagement had been a training exercise rather than a demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority. His hands moved across control surfaces with muscle memory, but his mind struggled to process implications that threatened everything he thought he knew about air combat. "Control, Viper 1-1. Request immediate stand-down authorization. Target aircraft has demonstrated capabilities beyond our current threat assessment." His radio call connected him to command authorities who possessed the security clearances to understand what had just happened. The response came back with bureaucratic precision that concealed layers of classification above his pay grade. "Viper 1-1, you are authorized to discontinue intercept. Return to base immediately for debrief. Acknowledge." Both F-22 pilots acknowledged with the mechanical professionalism of men who understood they had just encountered something that would require explanations they weren't qualified to give. Their aircraft turned toward home base with the steady precision of machines designed for exactly this type of mission. But their pilots carried questions that would haunt them for years. Reaper monitored their departure through sensors that painted detailed pictures of their flight profiles. The F-22s climbed to cruise altitude with the graceful efficiency of machines returning from routine patrol, giving no external indication of the technological education they had just received. Their pilots would face hours of debriefing, polygraph examinations, and security reviews designed to ensure their silence. Her own radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from command authorities, whose existence was compartmentalized beyond normal intelligence channels. "Ghost Rider, mission status report." "Control, Ghost Rider. Package delivered successfully. Escort mission complete. No complications." Her words conveyed the successful completion of an operation that would never appear in any official after-action report, a mission that existed in the spaces between legitimate military operations and plausible deniability. The morning sun continued its arc across endless sky as Reaper turned her aircraft toward coordinates that appeared on no published navigation chart. Below her, the desert stretched in variations of brown and tan that had witnessed decades of military testing, a landscape where experimental aircraft proved themselves before entering official service. Her A-10 had performed flawlessly, demonstrating capabilities that represented years of black budget development and engineering innovation. The twin engines hummed with quiet satisfaction behind her, their modified configuration producing thrust levels that pushed the boundaries of what turbofan technology could achieve. She thought about the F-22 pilots returning to their base, their minds full of questions they would never be allowed to ask publicly. Good pilots flying exceptional aircraft, constrained by rules and regulations that belonged to a simpler time when technology advanced at predictable intervals and national security could be maintained through conventional superiority. The world had become more complicated than that, much more complicated. The debrief room at Nellie's Air Force Base carried the sterile atmosphere of a medical examination facility crossed with an interrogation chamber. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across metal furniture, while recording equipment hummed with electronic efficiency. Rodriguez and Patterson sat at a table that had hosted similar conversations dozens of times, but never with implications that reached quite this deep into classified territory. Colonel Sarah Mitchell entered with the measured pace of someone who had spent 30 years managing situations that officially never happened. Her uniform bore the appropriate ribbons and insignia, but her eyes carried the weight of knowledge that existed in compartmentalized spaces beyond normal military hierarchy. She carried a briefcase that would remain unopened throughout their conversation. "Gentlemen, you've had an interesting morning." Her words carried implications that both pilots understood immediately. This wasn't a routine after-action review. It was damage control for an incident that threatened to expose capabilities that existed in the gray areas between experimental programs and operational deployment. Rodriguez shifted in his chair with the uncomfortable awareness that his career had just entered uncharted territory. "Ma'am, we encountered an aircraft with performance characteristics that don't match anything in our threat assessment databases. Electronic warfare capabilities that penetrated our defensive systems with surgical precision." "Tell me about the jamming sequence." Mitchell's request carried the weight of someone who already knew the answer, but needed official confirmation for records that would be sealed at classification levels above congressional oversight. Patterson described the 30 seconds of electronic warfare demonstration with technical precision that concealed the psychological impact of watching his F-22's sophisticated avionics reduced to useless static. His words painted pictures of jamming techniques that belonged in theoretical research papers rather than operational aircraft. "The target knew our call signs, our names, addressed us directly through encrypted communications that bypassed all our security protocols." Rodriguez's statement hung in the air like an accusation waiting for explanation. Mitchell nodded with the mechanical acknowledgement of someone confirming details that appeared in classified reports she had already read. "The aircraft you encountered this morning represents technology that exists several generations ahead of current deployment standards. What you witnessed was a demonstration of capabilities that will not enter general service for approximately 15 years. The implications of her words settled over both pilots with the weight of revelation. They had been chasing an aircraft from their own future, technology that represented the next evolution of air combat superiority. The electronic warfare demonstration had been a gentle lesson in humility rather than an act of aggression. "What's our classification level on this incident?" Patterson's question addressed the elephant that had been sitting in the room since they landed. "Everything you experienced this morning is classified at Special Access Program level. You will not discuss it with anyone lacking appropriate clearances, including your squadron mates, your families, or your personal journals. Violation of these restrictions carries penalties that extend beyond military justice." Mitchell's words carried the cold authority of someone who had witnessed careers destroyed by security violations. Both pilots acknowledged with the mechanical precision of men who understood they had just been inducted into a fraternity that existed in the shadows of official military operations. Their morning intercept mission had transitioned from routine patrol to compartmentalized knowledge that would follow them for the remainder of their careers. Outside the briefing room, normal base operations continued with the steady rhythm of military efficiency. Aircraft took off and landed according to schedules maintained by personnel who would never know about the technological demonstration that had occurred in restricted airspace just hours earlier. In classified hangars that appeared on no base directory, maintenance crews prepared Reaper's aircraft for its next mission. The classified hangar existed in a quantum state of bureaucratic invisibility, present on architectural blueprints but absent from official base directories. Located at the far end of Nellis Air Force Base, separated from normal operations by security checkpoints that appeared routine, while maintaining classification barriers impenetrable to conventional oversight. Inside, Reaper's A-10 sat surrounded by diagnostic equipment that existed nowhere in standard maintenance manuals. Technical Sergeant Maria Santos ran her hands along the aircraft's modified exhaust systems with the reverence of someone who understood she was touching technology that represented decades of black budget development. Her security clearance granted access to engineering specifications that pushed the boundaries of materials science and thermodynamics, modifications that transformed a conventional ground attack aircraft into something approaching science fiction. "How'd she handle today?" Santos asked as Reaper climbed down from the cockpit, her flight suit bearing the subtle stains of a morning spent pulling G-forces that would have incapacitated lesser pilots. Like a dream, the new engine configuration performed flawlessly during the vertical demonstration. Those F-22 pilots got a real education in advanced aerodynamics. Reaper's voice carried professional satisfaction mixed with genuine affection for an aircraft that had been modified specifically for her capabilities and mission requirements. The maintenance bay around them bustled with activity that appeared routine, while accomplishing tasks that belonged in experimental laboratories. Technicians analyzed flight data through computer systems that processed information at classification levels above their security clearances, looking for performance parameters that might indicate necessary adjustments to systems they weren't qualified to fully understand. Santos pulled up diagnostic displays that painted detailed pictures of engine performance, structural stress, and electronic system efficiency. The modified A-10 had operated within acceptable parameters throughout its morning demonstration, but margins of safety remained narrow when pushing experimental technology beyond conservative limits. The electronic warfare suite performed particularly well, clean jamming across all F-22 sensor frequencies without any detectable backscatter or system degradation. The technician's report addressed capabilities that officially didn't exist in any inventory maintained by conventional military branches. Reaper nodded with the satisfaction of someone whose morning's work had validated years of theoretical development and practical engineering. Her aircraft represented the convergence of multiple black programs, technologies that existed in compartmentalized spaces, where normal rules of physics yielded to advanced materials science and classified propulsion systems. "Mission planning wants to see you for next week's exercise parameters." Santos indicated a door that led to briefing rooms where maps displayed terrain features that appeared on no publicly available charts, locations where experimental aircraft could demonstrate capabilities without compromising their classified nature. The walk to mission planning took Reaper through corridors lined with photographs that told the unofficial history of American air superiority development. Test pilots whose names would never appear in history books, aircraft that existed only in classified databases, missions that maintained national security through technological advantages that remained invisible to potential adversaries. Commander Patricia Hayes waited in a briefing room that contained wall-mounted displays showing global situations that required responses at classification levels above congressional oversight. Her uniform indicated assignment to organizations that appeared in no official military hierarchy, but her authority extended into spaces where normal chain of command yielded to operational necessity. Outstanding work this morning, Reaper. The F-22 encounter provided valuable data on how conventional forces would respond to encountering our technology in operational circumstances. Hayes' words addressed implications that extended far beyond morning training exercises. The briefing that followed outlined missions that existed in the gray areas between legitimate military operations and activities that required plausible deniability for national security purposes. The mission briefing revealed operational requirements that existed in the spaces between official military doctrine and pragmatic national security necessities. Commander Hayes displayed satellite imagery showing global situations that demanded responses at classification levels that transcended conventional oversight, locations where American interests required protection through capabilities that officially didn't exist. Your next assignment takes you to the South China Sea. Intelligence indicates advanced radar installations that threaten freedom of navigation operations. Your mission parameters include electronic surveillance, capability assessment, and demonstration of American technological superiority through non-kinetic means. Hayes' words outlined objectives that would never appear in congressional briefings or public military statements. Reaper studied the tactical displays with professional interest that concealed personal emotions she had learned to compartmentalize years earlier. The South China Sea represented a chessboard where global powers maneuvered for advantage through technologies that pushed the boundaries of international law and military convention. Her modified A-10 would operate in airspace where mistakes carried consequences that extended far beyond individual survival. Rules of engagement. Her question addressed the fundamental constraint that separated military operations from acts of war, boundaries that became increasingly blurred when dealing with experimental technology and classified capabilities. You are authorized to demonstrate defensive systems as necessary for mission accomplishment and personal survival. Avoid kinetic engagement unless directly threatened with destruction. Your aircraft's electronic warfare capabilities should provide adequate deterrent effect without escalating to weapons release. Hayes' response outlined parameters that granted significant operational flexibility while maintaining plausible deniability for political authorities. The technical briefing that followed detailed radar installations that represented the cutting edge of Chinese air defense technology, systems designed specifically to counter American stealth capabilities and electronic warfare techniques. The mission would test not only Reaper's piloting skills, but also the effectiveness of countermeasures that existed several generations ahead of current deployment standards. Timeline is critical. Window of opportunity opens Tuesday at 2:30 local time and closes 6 hours later. Weather conditions provide optimal concealment, but diplomatic considerations require completion before business hours in Beijing. The operational constraints reflected political realities that influenced military planning at the highest levels of government. Reaper acknowledged with the mechanical precision of someone who had executed similar missions dozens of times, operations that maintained American strategic advantages through technological demonstrations that remained invisible to public oversight. Her aircraft would carry her into contested airspace, where nations tested each other's capabilities without formally acknowledging the existence of such testing. The briefing concluded with intelligence assessments that painted pictures of advanced Chinese radar operators who represented peer-level threats to American technological superiority. These weren't third-world technicians operating obsolete equipment. They were educated professionals using state-of-the-art systems designed specifically to counter the advantages that had dominated American air operations for decades. Any questions? Hayes' inquiry carried implications that extended beyond routine mission planning. Just one. When do I leave? Reaper's response demonstrated the professional confidence that had earned her assignment to missions that existed beyond normal military hierarchy. Outside the briefing room, normal base operations continued with the steady rhythm of visible military efficiency. Personnel moved between buildings according to schedules that maintained the appearance of routine training and equipment maintenance, concealing activities that pushed the boundaries of technology and international law. In classified workshops, technicians prepared her aircraft for missions that would never be acknowledged. The pre-mission preparation ritual had evolved over 12 years of operations that existed in the shadows of official military doctrine. Reaper's personal equipment checklist included items that appeared in no standard inventory. Encrypted communication devices that operated on frequencies reserved for special access programs. Navigation aids programmed with coordinates that existed only in classified databases. Survival gear designed for scenarios that officially couldn't happen. Her flight suit bore no name tags, no unit patches, no insignia that would identify her as an American pilot if circumstances required plausible deniability. The fabric itself represented advanced materials science, incorporating technologies that provided protection against electromagnetic interference and chemical agents, while maintaining the appearance of standard military equipment. Technical Sergeant Santos conducted final aircraft inspections with the thoroughness of someone who understood that mechanical failures in contested airspace carried consequences extending far beyond individual survival. Every system aboard the modified A-10 operated at the cutting edge of engineering capability, pushing theoretical limits that left no margin for error or equipment degradation. Electronic Warfare Suite is operating at 100% efficiency. New countermeasures package uploaded and tested. You should be invisible to anything they're currently deploying. Santos' report addressed capabilities that represented years of intelligence gathering and technological development, systems designed specifically to counter known Chinese radar installations. The fuel load calculations reflected mission parameters that allowed no room for navigational errors or tactical deviations. Every gallon represented precious range that might determine the difference between mission success and international incident. The modified engines consumed aviation fuel at rates that pushed the boundaries of what the airframe could carry, leaving flight planning with minimal reserves for contingencies. Weather update shows optimal conditions holding through your operational window. Cloud cover at 15,000 feet should provide adequate concealment during approach and departure phases. The meteorological briefing addressed environmental factors that could determine mission success or failure, atmospheric conditions that would either hide her aircraft or expose it to detection systems that represented peer-level threats. Reaper climbed into her cockpit with the mechanical precision of ritual, repeated hundreds of times.